Township Board of Supervisors, January 3rd, 2023 meeting at 4 o'clock to order. Welcome all, especially new Patton Township residents, to the Patton Township community, a place for all. At the conclusion of tonight's meeting, the board would hold an executive session. As you are able, please rise and join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the election of officers. The board should elect a chair and vice chair for 2023. I call for a nomination for a new chair for 2023. Supervisor Trevino.
I nominate Elliot Abrams.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Congratulations to our new chair.
All right. Don't be nervous, Elliot. You can do this.
Yeah, you can sit here if you want.
I can't call her the old chair because she's still young.
Oh, thank you. I like that.
Former chair.
We now need to nominate a vice chair.
I would like to nominate Pamela Robb.
I second the nomination.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any other nominations? Okay, the nominations are closed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great.
Right.
Okay. That means the town will become chair again next year.
Thank you.
That's a good thing. All right. The next item is we're considering any, first of all, are there any citizen comments? If anyone has any comment about anything that's not on the agenda, now's the time to come up and tell us about it. And don't be hesitant. And you get about 5 minutes to talk unless it takes longer or shorter. Okay, seeing none, are there any other things that anyone would like to put on the agenda that's not there now? So the crowds do that. And so we move to the next item, which is presentation and public hearings and organization for the Board of Supervisors. And we have to pick out which dates we're going to be meeting on. Is there a motion?
Oh,
So moved.
yeah.
Good
Sec-
move.
I'll
And
second.
seconded.
Yep.
Any comments? I'll make one comment that I've conveniently arranged to not be here on the 25th and also on March 22nd. And maybe one day in June, and all the others unless I'm sick. I'll be here.
Okay.
Anyone else have a conflict with any of these dates?
No.
Anyone love these dates? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, nobody's opposed, that's done.
And we'll keep the starting time at 5:30.
And also, we'll have the starting time at about an hour before 6.
Half an hour.
Half hour before 6.
For you, Elliot, it's an hour before 6.
Well, I don't like that. Well, somebody told me that this afternoon was at 3 o'clock. So I made it. All right. So we have the meeting dates. Then we have board committee appointments. We need to appoint members to the following, well, several ABC committees. And we'll just go down one by one. ABC Committee, 2 members. Currently, it's myself and Pamela.
That's good.
Does anybody want to change any of these? Yes.
Just for the sake of discussion, I'll make a motion that we approve the assignments as listed on the agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other comments on our own appointments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, so that's unanimous. And COG committee assignments. Typically, the chair goes to the
Executive.
COG executive committee unless, this year it's, what state college?
It is state college. The borough.
The borough this year, and then we're several years away from it. Okay. And then COG committee assignments. For this, we have to decide to appoint ourselves to different COG committees, and these are the ones. And here's the time that they meet. For example, executive meets at 12:15 on Tuesday prior to the general forum. And are there any? Would there be a motion that we approve these appointments?
Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
I just had a question about the public safety
Sure.
meetings. I didn't know how long they were.
Same as the rest of the meeting.
Generally study.
And I'm already vice chair. I move up to
Can you, Pam, can you speak up so everyone can hear you?
No, I was telling,
Okay.
my colleague that I'm on there, I'm already vice chair, so I automatically move up to chair. So we have one person already on public safety.
So we don't need another person.
Did you want to be on that as the alternate? Or did you want to make a change? Or is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no,
No, I was talking to Sutan, sorry.
Yeah, I could be an alternate.
yeah,
That's fine with me. I don't,
I'd move that.
okay.
Or anyone else can move it? I should shut up.
No, that's good.
well, it's fine, so
So we're going to do that.
we'll
Okay.
make that change.
Okay.
It will be Susan.
How about finance? I hope you're still going to be.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to be on the finance committee.
You're great. You're great.
You're willing to be the alternate?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the human resources, facilities, and Lucy, and Parks and Recreation, and also climate action and sustainability.
So I'd love to stay with climate action, and I'm willing to stay on facilities. And I'm also, and then later, I'm on the solar power purchase agreement, which is, it's a little bit later. I'm on that with Larry, or Larry's on it with me, I should, no, I'm on it
Would
later.
anyone else like to take Lucy? Land use and infrastructure.
I'm already your alternate, so I'll move up on that.
Is that, oh, okay, I was going to say, is that too much for you, being chair?
Well, it isn't, but I'm not running for it, so.
Yeah.
It's not like we have to have a long caucus or 450 people ask to vote, and then they have to vote again several times, like it's happening a couple hundred miles to our south. So you'd like to be you'd like to be the regular member?
Yeah, I'll be the regular member. Who's going to be the alternate? You want to switch?
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe the alternate, sure.
All right.
Great. Okay, so that takes care of that. We're finished with page 5 on here. And the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors has its conference coming up on April 23rd to 26th of 2003. We need to, 2023, and we have to pick somebody who is going to represent us at the voting. And remember that it may be warmer by that time than it should be in the next few months. Who's interested in going to the conference?
I plan to go. And Doug, I plan to spend 2 nights there, Sunday and Monday nights, and come back on Tuesday.
Okay. Well, I can reach out individually to see, get lodging and all that from everybody, but if you're planning to go now,
Okay.
then we need to record who's gonna, we need to tell PSAPs who's gonna be the voting delegate too.
I would say Dan.
Yeah.
Dan be the voting member. Until we can get our schedules at COG, I want to hold off, but I would like to go with, but I want Dan as the voting member.
Do we need a motion or just consensus?
We can have a motion.
However you wanna do it. You can.
Okay, I nominate Dan to be the voting member.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other nominations? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Dan.
Any opposed? Okay, none. Good.
Thank you, Dan.
And now we're up to public safety. And it says here that there are no items, so everybody must be safe.
Well, I hope so.
Public works operations, no items either, perhaps partly because it's chilly around now. We're not digging up any roads. Hopefully no more sinkholes. Engineering, planning, and zoning, no items.
No, there are items. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, number 6?
Yeah, 6A.
Okay, that's right, all right. Request for zoning amendment to add climate control, public self-storage and permitted use in the C2 planned commercial district. Who'd like to talk about that?
I'll introduce this. So, Mr. Bob Poole, who we've seen in various capacities here, doing business as Space Smart Self-Storage, has requested the township consider making changes to our zoning regulations to add climate-controlled public self-storage as a permitted use in the C2 district, which is our planned commercial. It's larger, it's commercial properties that are on lots larger generally than 3 acres. So Home Depot, Lowe's, Colonnade, those are all C2 properties. Mr. Poole's proposed that this use be defined as quote-unquote public self-storage facilities with 60% or more of the floor area of the facility being conditioned, as in being heated or cooled, and no more than 40% of the floor area be ambient drive-up storage. Alex, can you put the attachment with the photos up? I think probably one of the best. You can see he provided photos of several existing facilities. They also had a request that the township look at our parking requirements for such a use, and if the board so concurs with the request and sends it forward to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission could also take a look at the parking requirements. We have some representatives from Space Mart and Mr. Poole here. I know Tony at least is, are you going to speak, Tony?
I can, sure.
And introduce your colleagues there.
Before you start, that picture there with the clouds in it is more representative than the one with the clear sky for around here.
So noted. There we go. So my name is Tony Fruchtel. I'm with Pantera Engineering. We're the civil engineer for the project. Also with me is Jeff Grubb. Jeff is a partner of Mr. Poole's in the Space Mart project. Doug covered most of the request. I think the one thing we would like to say is the focus of the request is the CP district, which would be the area next to Home Depot. There's an out parcel there that's been there for quite a while now. It's about 2.5 acres. Kind of sits back in there. It seems like this might be a good use for that area. And you've seen the pictures of the facilities. They're examples of what they want to do. I will let you know that more than likely it will be a 2-story facility, and that's a thing for self-storage now. They put elevators in them, and they make use of the space on the second floor. They will be climate controlled. The one picture you saw actually had was actually that of a independent office area for the, let's see, the first one actually. That one right there. So those are all actual facilities that were done by the proponents of the request for the zoning change. And just asking that you consider it, move it to the Planning Commission, we can discuss it. But we'd be happy to answer any questions you have here tonight.
Do any board members have any questions, concerns, fears, or whatever? Yes, ma'am.
I just would like to forward this to our planning commission for their review.
It's moved that we move it to the planning commission for their review.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that next goes to the planning commission, and that's typical.
Yep, very good. Thank you.
So, Planning Commission will meet Monday night. Did you want to say something, Jeff, if you'd like to?
Thank you.
So they're meeting Monday night. It'll be an introduction to the
Yep.
Topic for the Planning Commission. Feel free if you want to come talk about it.
Yeah, yes, we'll
You're,
plan on being
more than welcome to
Monday
do
night.
that, and it'll be kind of a Planning Commission, see what questions they might have, what further research we might need to do,
Yep.
and then bring it back to be back at the Planning Commission on the February agenda also.
Very good. Yeah, thanks, Doug.
Which now brings us up to administration, authorities, boards, and commissions, and committee recommendations.
Yeah, the ABC committee, which was Mr. Abrams and Ms. Robb, have made the following recommendations for Planning Commission 4-year term. Debbie Skittai, I think I got that right. The other seat for Planning Commission 4-year term, Brian Peterka, Peterka. For the Open Space Stewardship Committee, 3-year partial term, Ann Donovan. And liaison to State College Borough Water Authority Board of Directors, Rich Schmidt. So I'd ask that the board consider action to make those recommendations.
Is there a motion?
I would like to move that we accept the names as read by Doug Erickson.
Been moved
Second.
and seconded. Any comments? Then all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we will appoint these people directly.
And I'll get with the ABC committee. We need to fill 2 seats on the RAC yet, so I'll reach out to you and Pam.
Do you have applicants for that?
Yeah, we have 4 or 5
Oh, good.
applicants,
Okay.
so, yep. We prioritized, got the Planning Commission done first.
Absolutely.
We're good.
Yeah, good job.
Okay, so we just done that. And then recertification project, introduction for board members.
Elliot will recall back in 1996.
Oh, my God.
When the township initially consolidated its body of legislation into the code of Patton Township.
I was born 6 years before that.
Which Elliot will fondly remember is this very large brown book that everybody used to carry around with them all the time. Obviously now there's an online version of it, so the need to lug it around is only restricted to local government wonks like me. But it is 26 years old at this point. It has been amended. So today, most often when we pass ordinances, say this requested change to the C2 gets all the way to an ordinance. The ordinance we pass typically today are amendments to this book. So all the laws of Patton Township, which we generally don't call them laws, we call them regulations or rules or things like that. So if we want to make a change to this, we pass an ordinance, and that's that change. So sometimes we make wholesale changes. Things like a few years ago we passed the noise ordinance, which became a whole new chapter in here. If you go through the book, it's divided up into chapters. Each chapter covers a specific set of regulations and rules. As noted, since 1996, there's been more than 200 changes to this book. As you might believe and think, sometimes things get a little messy when you make lots and lots of changes, especially in places in zoning. We kind of ran out of numbers. If you notice, if you look like and we'll talk about numbering at some point, but you notice the chapter numbers, they don't run sequentially. They left room between the chapter numbers so we could add chapters as we needed. Well, in zoning, they didn't leave room between all the subsection numbers, so we've had to do some creative things with numbering to squeeze new things into zoning. So one of the things we want to fix is that. And we'll have a larger discussion on numbering and stuff later on. But we engaged General Code, who's been the company who did the original codification and also the ones who keep everything up to date. We engaged them last year to do a complete recodification, and you can see there the goals of that recodification was to bring legislation up to date in line with Pennsylvania statutes, make the overall code consistent in organization, format, style, and content, identify conflicts, redundancies, inconsistencies, and generally make it easier to find things in there. So they've completed that first step, which was really a line-by-line review of our entire code, and it was a very thorough job. They came back with 158 comments and questions that related to a whole range of questions and comments about what we should be doing or things we should do. Myself and Alex Castruccini and Leslie Warner, who's in the back, our senior planner, we went through all those comments and resolved about 2/3 of them. There are about 61 remaining items that we need to go through. When I mean the whole body. Of those, some I need to schedule some time with our solicitor, Betsy Dupuy. There's quite a few that staff needs to do a little bit more research and review on. And there's 14 that we tagged as needing some more detailed level of review from the Board of Supervisors and give you a preliminary look at these things. When we're all said and done, there'll be one ordinance that says, this is the new code of Patton Township. It's making all these 100 and some probably small changes. Some of them are very small changes. Some of them are updates to, wherever we referenced an existing state law, they checked that reference and they gave us the correct one if it was incorrect or out of date. So there's a lot of changes in that. There's some wording changes. Most of them are pretty minor, and again, like I said, we're going to talk about renumbering probably at the next meeting. Some of them are a little bigger. They actually are changes to what's actually in the code, and most of those are the types of things we're going to talk about tonight. I detailed 5 of them here that I want to get board input on, and these kind of run the gamut of the range of questions that I'll be coming back to the board to talk about. So I'm going to pause right here and ask and see if there's any questions or comments at this point from the board. Okay. So I'm going to go through these next 5 that start about the middle of page 9 and end on page 10, and just give you a little bit of background. There was a one sheet kind of more depth explanation for several of these. Not everyone. I tried to keep them more or less in a consistent format. So the first one is on the Planning Commission, the authorization that established the Planning Commission, and General Code noted it's out of date and should be updated. They offered a recommended revision that was shown on the one-pager, and staff agrees with the recommendation. So the board has 3 options. So this at the end of the day, this really is a change in our code. We're changing the language in the code. We're not really changing what the outcome of the code gives us. The planning commission will still be in existence. It'll still have 7 members. They'll still serve for 4 years, but we're going to change the language, the authorizing language within the code. So that's why I wanted to bring this one to the board before we did anything. So the questions for the board is, should we change it as recommended by general code? Should we leave it be? Or should we defer action until after the code is updated? And I'll ask the board what if they have any questions, comments, or
What's
ready for.
everyone's pleasure on this?
Sounds fine to me to, accept the revised language.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we take the revisions as recommended.
Okay. No, we're not making final revisions with this. These are just, because at one
Yeah.
point I'll bring this all back together,
Okay.
packaged up.
But so far,
Yep. So this is the preliminary approval
Yeah.
of a change.
all in favor of the preliminary approval of the change?
So moved.
Aye.
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 Against? I didn't say aye before, but
Okay, thanks.
And then the next one is on junkyards.
Yep. So the recommendation on junkyards is, and I didn't include a sheet on this, primarily because this is probably, it's obsolete. We don't use it anymore, but there may be aspects of it in that chapter that we may want to incorporate into zoning, which is probably the more appropriate place where we do all our other land use regulations are in zoning. So this here, the staff recommendation is that we defer any action with the recodification and add this to the planning commission's project list for them to work on sometime in the next year or two. So if the board agrees with that recommendation, we'll take that. We'll so note that
We
with
can do this
general
by
code.
consensus.
Yep, consensus.
Yep.
And would everyone agree that we would not allow anybody to have a dog in residence at the junkyard? It's cruelty to animals. Okay, and then we're up to definition of parks.
Yeah, it just keeps getting more and more exciting here. And this is how thorough the review is. So the reviewer made the connection that we have different regulations for 2 separate types of properties. Parks are in one category and open spaces are in a separate category. And her recommendation was that we add a sentence at the end of the definition of parks, just to clarify that that open spaces are not parks and that they're regulated under a different chapter of the code. Staff agreed with that recommendation, and we're asking the board if they also agree.
Dan?
I agree, but I think there needs to be additional language added to the end of that sentence. You specified particular current open space areas, but if you're going to add new open space areas, then you have to come back and amend this section again. So there needs to be a general
Okay.
statement about
Future.
any additional open space properties to be added, that will be added later.
So it could be all present and possible additional.
Any existing.
Yeah, the
Okay.
future properties to be listed in chapter 110, or not 110.
Good catch.
Right.
Okay. So with that change, is
Should
the board
we
agree?
say in there that this means that there are different regulations in effect, so that nobody...
Well, I don't know if it needs to say there, right there. I mean, this is the definition of parks, remember? So, I mean, we can say, well, it refers, it says the term park does not include the areas that are governed by chapter 110, so it sends you to a different chapter.
Okay.
So I would say it's also there, but I think Dan's, because we already have, there's the Seward property that actually hasn't been added to chapter 110 yet. So we'll probably do that at some point this year, but we haven't done it yet, so.
So is it agreeable to make this new definition?
Yes.
Yes.
We'll do that. And then we're up to peddling and soliciting, and in this case, peddling has nothing to do with bicycles.
No. So here, general code, again, had noticed that, I can't remember where they picked it up, but that actually the police department is the one who actually administers the peddling and soliciting licensing. So all we're really doing in here is in a couple different instances changing the term manager to police department. Just want to make sure that's okay with the board before we tell them to move forward with it.
Is there any reason why it should be one or the other?
It says manager, and for the last 25 years, the planning or the police department has done. I think it's good to designate who's responsible for it. So it's staff's recommendation that we do make the change.
Sounds like it has more teeth that way too.
Pardon?
It sounds like it has more teeth that way too.
I don't know. It's just the way, like I said, ever since I've been here, the police have always done it, and the manager, about the only thing the manager does is sign the cards as the township secretary. So I think to be consistent and make it accurate, if somebody should ever want to challenge it at the district magistrate or something, I think it's best that we make the change.
Okay, so any problems with this one?
No.
Okay, so we'll do that tentatively. Moves us to
We're almost to the end, so if anybody wants. Remind myself where we're at for this one, 153.
Are we up to 7C or?
No.
No, we're at the top of page 10. So there's the last one. So in reviewing chapter 153 subdivision land development, it details the application and review process for subdivision land development plans. And they noted that our time frames are close, but not exactly do not exactly mirror the language that's in the municipality's planning code. Recall, the municipality's planning code is the state law that we have to follow to make our zoning and subdivision regulations all valid. So at this point, they're suggesting we make some changes in sections 153.8 and 153.12 to add the underlined language there where it says from general code reviewer. So that's the language that really comes right out of the municipality's planning code, and it's as convoluted. It's not convoluted. It's as complicated as it seems. So there's an application date, and then you have to start counting from the application date unless there's a planning commission meeting within the next 30 days, and then you restart counting. So it's somewhere between 90 and 120 days from the date of application. So it's a little confusing, but we have an excellent Excel spreadsheet that figures all that out for us. So in this case, staff agrees with the recommendation from general code that we adopt this language out of the MPC for our subdivision and land development review process. And if the board's okay with that, we'll mark that consensus
Yeah.
also.
Sounds good.
As for 4C, before we even start this, it's just, to me, it's a shame that this problem even exists, but it shouldn't exist any longer. But
What's that?
the problems brought up in 4C shouldn't exist. I mean, people are people.
You mean
so-
7C?
7C, right.
Oh, well,
But we're not in the official group that can investigate these things, right?
well, I'll back up and do some of the background
Right.
on this. So that's all we have under 7B. So, and like I said, at the next couple of board meetings, I'll bring back a few in each of those. I can't promise they'll all be that exciting as that, but again, there are changes, there are instances where we're actually making changes to the language of the regs, and I want to make sure that the board's comfortable with those before we, like I said, package those all up into one omnibus change to the code at some point. So we should probably be making those final changes, I hope, hopefully in April of this year. Again, I'll be working with the rest of the staff and with Betsy here over the next probably 60 days to get all their other questions resolved. And then it's mostly a general code back then producing the final version of everything. So we've been very happy with the work they've done to date. So I'd like to get this project finished before I exit the building. So.
Otherwise, you can't resign.
Something like that, yeah.
Until it's done.
We got to tie it to that something.
Okay. If you're ready, we can move to the next item.
Go ahead.
So, Anti-Discrimination Regulations and Regional Human Relations Commission. We talked about this really going back 2021, May of 2021, and a little bit off and on in 2022. The delay came about because the David Probolka, who was the former manager at Ferguson Township, he was really the one who was moving this forward, and he had taken the lead. And then when he left and took a new job down by Harrisburg, it had to wait for it to move up on somebody else's list of things to do. So primarily State College Borough and Ferguson Township have been working on this issue. They've come to more or less an agreement. And Betsy, if you want to get closer at some point, we'll look to you also. So there is a state human relations commission. There is state law that provides the same anti-discrimination regulations and rules and prohibits a lot of these acts. The state law used to not cover all issues related to gender and sex, but it was changed a couple years ago to include those now. So, but the state law also provides, so there's a state body, a state human relations commission that hears complaints and provides adjudication on those. There's also state advisory bodies that are not bodies that hear complaints, but help spread information and education things for the Human Relations Committee. But the state law also provides that cities, regions, municipalities of the Commonwealth can establish their own local Human Relations Act. So State College Borough has their own currently. They hardly ever hear a case, but it exists. Other local ones exist in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, York, Allentown, Reading, Lancaster, and Erie County. So, as I said, the Borough, State College, and Ferguson Township have been working fairly judiciously on this over the last, I'm going to say 2 or 3 months of 2022. They've come to a point where they're got mostly a set of regulations that they're both moving forward to pass and then adopt an intermunicipal government to form a regional human relations commission. Now, this commission, as it's currently proposed, would be a body that would actually be one of the ABCs of the State College Borough. That's so that there is an agency that can provide insurance coverage and study like that. We would make recommendations to them for somebody to appoint to fill our seat on the HRC. So in details, it's actually State College Borough, but it will cover the municipalities that are members to it. So at this point, it would be State College Borough, Ferguson Township, and Patton Township. Invitations have been sent out to other center region municipalities. Nobody is stepping up right at the moment. So Harris Township, College Township have both been asked. I don't believe we sent anything to Half Moon Township, but we could rectify that if anybody thought we should. There was a couple other municipalities at one point or another in the county were looking at it, but we don't think they're currently involved, they're currently interested. Would you say, is that accurate?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah. So it's those three. So if an incident occurred in Harris Township, those residents would have to go to the state body. So they have someplace they can go, it's just not the local. So if something happens, either a housing discrimination issue in Patton Township, it would come to the local, to our, what we're going to call regional HRC. If it was an employment discrimination issue that involved either an employer who was based in Patton Township or an employee who lives in Patton Township, I think, can we do it that way? Or? I
think we're going to probably defer to where the employer is based.
Okay. So that's why I have the solicitor here.
There's some operational issues that I think the managers of the resulting 3 communities at this point will then have to sort out in some kind of procedures that are not in the documents you currently have.
So you have in front of you a draft ordinance that the borough is looking at, and Ferguson Township is looking at something that's very similar. As you recall, Ms. Dupuy is also the solicitor for Ferguson Township, so she has reviewed this. So there's the anti-discrimination ordinance, and then there's also an document, item 7C.4 in our agenda. That's the establishment of the Regional Human Relations Commission. So I will set those in front of the board. I'll say, Betsy, did you have any other comments you wanted to make at this point?
I think you've covered it. As I said, there will be some procedural understandings that the managers will work out as these complaints, if any, come forward. The borough has had, I think, a total of 2 or 3 complaints over the entire tenure of this ordinance, and none since the PHRC agreed to take on the gender-based issues. So it's not really clear, especially in the employment context, that anyone would probably use this. It's probably more likely in the housing context. And that's simply because most people in the employment context are generally looking for compensation for lost wages and those kinds of things. That's not something this commission can necessarily award. That's really not something even PHRC, or if you're familiar, the EEOC, which is the Equal Opportunity Commission, can do. And so what happens in most of those cases is there's never really an adjudication by the government bodies. They get what's called a right to sue letter because those bodies have a limited amount of time to investigate. I think it's 180 days or something that they have to investigate. And they go to federal court and they sue. Now that gender is included in that, that will mean that any cases related to that are around employment, and I think the most recent one the borough had was related to an employment issue, will likely go that route too. So it's hard to really gauge how much will happen here. One of the things that was debated, and I think, Betsy, you may have been involved in some of those early conversations, was does this ride along with someone filing at the state? Do we have an obligation? Basically, if you file here, we're going to adjudicate it here, but that doesn't mean that any rights you would have under the PHRC regulations would be adjudicated, at that level. We're not going to pass these forward. So if you are a litigant, you need to decide what forum you want to be in and what's your best advantage. And that's probably why in the past the borough has not seen many of these cases, because most individuals talk to a lawyer or someone in the law who typically recommends the state organization as opposed to the local. So, but we can see what happens. Maybe there'll be a change in how that occurs.
Yeah, I think one of the prime things that's in this proposal, and if you go to the one about establishing the Human Relations Commission, or maybe I can't remember where it is. Anyhow, there's the first option is a mediation option. So there's always going to be an attempt to get the parties together and see if we can come up with an amicable resolution before it even goes into a thorough investigation. So I think that's one of the primary, what's the point of this, you might ask after Betsy talked about the limits on what the local is. But there is, like I said, there is a mediation option that's going to be tried, like I said, and I think that's worth something.
So you're saying the mediation option, this is saying is only an option with the local?
I couldn't tell you how the
Now,
state
PHRC
operates.
also has, I just did a case for a government employer, and they have a mediation option as well. Most of them have all gone to that and trying to resolve cases by using some form of mediation. I think the thought is people who want to really mediate as opposed to litigate, may find this a more reasonable forum because it is local, and it is, they don't have to travel, and they don't have to take a lot of effort to get somewhere for a meeting or something. That is one of the areas that the managers will sort out. I think the intent is to probably use, I'm going to get the name wrong, Community Alternatives and Justice as the mediating group, because obviously the commission cannot be the mediators.
Yeah.
Because they would, if the mediation failed, they would then be the adjudicator. So there has to be somebody in between. So that's another one of the little wrinkles that the managers will work out in some procedures as to how that would occur.
Yeah, if you go to item 7C.4, it starts right at the very bottom of page 4 and continues at the top of page 5. It's the mediation option. Talks about after the respondent's answer has been received, the commission shall invite parties to voluntarily participate in mediation of the dispute and what goes on if it's resolved successfully or not. So yeah, that's where that option resides. So
The way I look at this is that if somebody were to ask me, why should we be part of this? I can name a number of reasons, but none of them rise to that we have to be. But if someone says, why are you not? That would bother me because I don't think there's any good reason not to be part of it. And so that's sort of a negative to suggest the positive doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So the commission will be set up so it's fairly easy for communities to join in. In terms of costs, if the complaint's in your municipality, then you're generally responsible to fund the cost of the investigation. Typically, if it gets to that point, investigation starts after the mediation option. Generally going to hire an investigator who probably works for a law firm to do a thorough investigation of the case. Depending, if it's real simple, the manager may do it, but there may be some costs. Again, Betsy said the borough's done maybe 2 or 3 cases in 10 years or something like that. So a typical case might run $1,000, $1,500 or something along those lines. So.
And I think the borough has offered, they've got someone now on their planning staff, especially on the housing side, that has some experience. So they've offered that they might provide that kind of support to Patton and Ferguson and any others. Obviously, there would be a reimbursement then back to the borough for those costs, but they certainly have offered that as well. So that, especially in light of the fact that I think a lot more likelihood is housing complaints, again, than the employment complaints, because most people with an employment complaint tend to go right to a lawyer. And that's not wrong. That's probably good because they need to get the advice of where they go, because their rights under certain laws pass by time, and so if you go the wrong route, you may run out of time to take the other route if this one doesn't work. So, yeah.
Any questions?
So concerning the cost, I know what the cost would be to us. Is there What is the cost generally if we are not part of this? We don't have a local,
Well, I'd be fairly, just be our share of helping the borough's administrative costs for,
right?
advertising the meeting schedule,
Yeah, so
legal
1,000,
ads,
1,500.
probably maybe $1,000 a year, something like that.
Okay,
That
so
might even be on the high side.
Yeah, so I've gotten a question from a constituent about the cost of this. And so in comparison to what it would cost us, I'm assuming that if we did not enter into this arrangement and we were only the PA.
Pennsylvania Human Relations
Yeah,
Commission.
exactly, existed, then all costs would be borne at the state level.
Right.
Right, and none at the local level. But to be able to report that it's $1,000, $1,500, and it's very unusual, I feel very comfortable reporting that information back. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's right for the initial costs, and I think if you got a complaint and got it, I think your manager's going to come to you and say, we've gotten a complaint, and we've got an estimate of what it's going to cost to investigate, and there's a lot involved here, if that were to occur, right? It's not like you're going to suddenly be surprised by that. I mean, so the couple $1,000s a year to pay for the borough to administer it, and they'll have to appoint a solicitor for the commission, they'll have to meet a couple of times at least to organize, just kind of like a zoning hearing board, right? Sometimes your zoning hearing board organizes and never has to do anything, so, yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Well, we don't really need to approve anything tonight.
This would be tentative, basically.
Yeah. So again, I provided a rough calendar for moving forward on this. As I noted, State College Borough and Ferguson Township are anticipated to take action on these ordinances here in the next couple of weeks. So at our next meeting on the 25th, we'll review what they did, see if there's any changes to what's been approved here. Then, if there are changes, we'll all take a look at them, move forward. Set our next meeting after that is February 8th. I encourage everybody to take a thorough look at these things, make sure you understand what we're doing. If that February 8th would then be kind of a final opportunity for comments and changes, and then if we're okay, then we would move forward to adoption on March 8th.
Pam, since you proposed the motion, is it okay with you? Sure. We have a tentative. I just want the other people to know that we're planning to do this.
So do we need a motion, or can we just do by consensus?
I would recommend you do it by consensus, since this ordinance has not been publicly advertised. I don't want anybody to think you've prejudged something on us, so, I mean, I think if your consensus is you're going to move forward, that's...
Is there a consensus on anyone not in a consensus? Yes. Well, we will plan to do this at the end of January. Okay, good.
Thank you.
So, that brings us to pending board work items. I don't really see any here. No, yes.
Well, we have at the end of the agenda is always a list of pending board work items. The list that we have for this year is the same as the list we had for last year. And the board prioritized it, I believe, in that order, if you look on page 14. So again, we'll take this opportunity. We're not taking any action tonight, but wanted to get this in front of you. Again, I will send out a brief survey here in the next, about a week before the next meeting. It'll be a little before that, because I'm out of town from the 14th to the 23rd or 24th. So I send out and ask you to take a look at each of these items again. Do you think it should stay on the list of pending work items, yes or no? If your answer is yes, then how should we rate it, high, medium, or low? But tonight, if you have any other items you'd like to add to the list and get input from everybody, now would be the time to let me know about those. Or if you think the board had any consensus that we should drop anything, we could also take care of that tonight. but the actual prioritization will take place between now and the next meeting. I get all the information from everybody, I'll consolidate that and bring the new listing to you, and the board will have one more opportunity on the 25th. If they want to change the order of those, you can do that at that point. But
First, if anyone has anything they'd like to add.
I don't have anything to add, but I'm wondering why we still have authorities dissolvement on the list.
because we haven't finished it.
Well, the board already approved it.
Well, there'll be more things to do, so at some point, if it moves up high on the list, then the manager and the solicitor will have to take some positive action to make it happen.
So you're saying it's not a simple thing to
No.
do? I see, okay.
We did get one letter from somebody who thinks we should consider the stargazing permit.
Yeah, and we can, yep, so that was all forwarded to you, we'll include it in the next agenda, and then we can have a little more discussion about that at the next meeting, or if you'd like to discuss it now, it's not, you know, the public hasn't seen that letter yet, so. I think their basic recommendation was to move it to the RAC to get some input, and then bring it back to the board at some point.
Does anyone want to take anything off here?
Some, just a little bit confused, you've got a list of pending board items. Oh, wait, hold on a second. And then at the end, there is ongoing items. There's some repeat, last page.
Yeah, there are a few things that we're working on, that staff's working.
Such as the stargazing. And the-
No, the
That's-
board, if
that's
you look,
pending.
can you go to page 14 of the agenda, Alex? So stop there at the top. So there's board work tasks that are currently in process on page 14.
Oh, and then pending board work.
Yeah, so those are the ones that we're working on. Some of them we're working fairly slowly on.
That's okay.
But they're actually, somebody's doing something on them.
Okay.
The pending work tasks then below that are actually things that nobody's doing really working on these at this time.
Okay.
So, if you notice if you go up to the upper one, regulation of single-use plastics, that was on the list last year.
Yeah.
And it was the top item on our list of pending work tasks last year. So it's been moved up. I've been in a couple of meetings with representatives from College Township, State College Borough, and Ferguson Township on just some preliminary
Gotcha.
of proceeding forward in some sort of joint fashion. It hasn't gotten very far, but it has been actually, some work's been done.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's kind of the hierarchy of, and then as you notice, we had Human Relations Commission was at the top of that, currently in process, and now that it's actually a agenda item, it's
Yep.
been stricken from that list. And
Some people don't think that the straw is the thing that will break climates back. But it's a contributor.
yeah. So if there's no questions, then expect an email with a link to a survey. And
Thanks.
you can fill out the survey, or you can just put your answers on the email and get them back to me one way or the other. Either one will work, so.
Do you have a reminder date? When to get that into you? Yes.
Yeah, I'll send that and put that in the email too.
Okay, good. So we're finished with this then, right?
Pardon?
We're finished with this, and we move
Yep.
now to the consent agenda.
Yep.
We have a list of items here that if somebody wants to take these out and look at a specific one, we can do that. And seeing none, then we're up to the real exciting part of this.
Well, we need
Do we
a
to
motion
approve that?
Oh,
and a vote on the
motion
consent
to
agenda.
The consent agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved, it's been seconded.
Second.
Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and now the exciting part here is the manager's report.
Thank you. First, I want to announce that I have a conflict of interest with the manager selection process, so I will not be involved in the process anymore. If you didn't see the email, go refer to the email that I sent out earlier today. It's nothing to worry about, but just I have a conflict, so I shouldn't be part of that process. Tyler Jollies will be filling in on the administrative side for me, and LaWanna Moore, who's the Assistant Township Secretary, will be working with GovHR on that. GovHR is doing 90% of the work, so, but I won't have any further involvement in the issue, so I wanted to make that announcement. Couple of items wanted to bring to your attention. Item A1, remediation of an old dump site in Patton Woods. We found a very, very old dump site. We don't know how far it goes back, but it's had a lot of glass in it. Was cleaned up. Ken had been working diligently for the last few months. Really, the question was, from a regulatory point of view, what do we need to do to clean this up? And Ken worked through, I think, refuse and solid waste, or county conservation district, and then DEP. And finally, we found DEP's response was it's so old that it predates all environmental regulations that the state has. So it's back on you to figure out what's the best thing to do with it. So that, you know, by the time we got all those answers, then we went back to Joe Wilson, who, if you've been involved in our open space program, Gypsy Moths, Joe's a man of many talents. So we asked Joe to go out and look for it, and he did a good analysis of it. As he noted, it's primarily very old glass. Well, it's not even primarily. It's 100% very old glass, which glass is inert, so it doesn't decompose. All the organics, all the metal, anything else that was in there has gone back to its basic elements. It's decomposed, it's gone, it's rusted away. So all that's really left in there is glass. And Joe even noted that most of the glass is so old it doesn't even have sharp edges anymore. So his recommendation was we go in, and the road crew's been out there a couple of times in the past, and I think we took out 14 5-gallon buckets that we basically pulled up by hand. And Joe recommended that we go through a process of going out there, blowing the leaves off, raking up what we can see again, and then blowing the leaves back on and leaving some tape up for a while, just so everybody understands. But basically make the surface safe, and then not worry about, you know, how deep do we have to go. That was my question when Ken first brought it to me. I didn't know how deep does this go? How deep do we have to go? But again, it's became a non-regulatory issue, so it's up to us to do something that we consider make it safe. Ken's worked with the land. There's a couple of landowners where it's right on the edge of Patton Woods, and a couple of private properties. So Ken's been talking with them and notifying them. If the board doesn't have any questions or comments about this, we'll be moving forward with it. Ken will send copies of Mr. Wilson's recommendations to the landowners, let them know, and I think we can resolve this whole issue sometime later this spring or summer. Pam?
Do we have to put up signs or a safety tape or anything like that because we're dealing
We've had tape up there, safety tape up there, but I think as Joe had noted, once we go through this process that he noted, return the waste site in 2023, blow the leaves off, and once again remove all visible glass from the surface by hand, and then put the leaves back on top. And at that point, he says it's not a danger to anybody, so we can take the caution tape down at that point.
Okay.
So
I was just wondering because of the weather we've been having with, the severe weather that we've been having.
Yeah, it's not, it's close to a trail, but it's not on a trail, so, so I think, like I said, there's no regulatory thing that we need to do, no regulatory requirements, so, we're at the point where we just need to make it safe and keep it safe, so, we'll put it on Ken's list to periodically, every couple of years, go out there and take a look at it.
Thank you.
Because, yeah, freeze and thaw will move stuff back up to the top at some point, but,
Okay. Thank
but,
you.
yeah. Not an environmental hazard, just kind of
Okay.
an annoyance that needs a little more attention. So that's the remediation of the old dump site. I also enclosed a email from the borough manager, State College borough manager, that they are moving forward with franchise agreement with Chantel Cable. We had talked about this earlier. We're probably several months behind in that process, but we are working at it. We're working cooperatively with Harris and Ferguson, or Harris and College Townships. Ferguson Township's schedule is somewhere between the boroughs and ours. But I think at the end of the day, we'll all have the same franchise agreement. Again, even once we sign the contract with Chantel, their estimate is they won't be able to provide service to anybody for about 3 years. While it'll take them that long to get their physical plant all installed and be ready to turn on service for folks in this region. So that's moving forward.
So why don't we do it now then?
Pardon?
So why shouldn't we just get it done now?
Well, we need to get the franchise. We need to get a draft franchise agreement
Right.
in front of everybody for review and agreement. And then once Chantel has that franchise agreement, then they'll start hanging their wire and putting in those agreements. There's a thing called make ready for when you're hanging new wires on poles. So every inch of that power pole or that phone pole is leased or owned by somebody. And a lot of times to hang a new wire on a pole, the people that are already on there need to move their wires up or down or the other side of the pole or something like that. That's called make ready. The PUC and FCC regulate make ready work, but really it can take, by the time you tell somebody you want to hang and you get an agreement with them, and you have to negotiate an agreement, you pay for the right to be on that pole. From the time that you get all those agreements in place, typically it's about a year to 18 months before all the make ready's done for you to go out and hang that your line on those poles. So Chantel does this. This is what Chantel's business is. They're typically the second provider in a market, and they've told us it's 2 to 3 years, closer to 3 years before they're ready to provide service in an area. So that's the schedule.
So, well, that's why I asked, because, I mean, every day that we don't get something in place so that they can start for 2 or 3 years is another delay.
It's being worked on. I mean, we met with them. We said, yeah. We said we'll probably mirror what the borough franchise agreement is, but until everybody sits down, Chantel's probably negotiating 20 or 30 of these franchise agreements at any one time. So it's moving forward probably as fast as it's going to move forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyone else have anything to add or subtract? Okay. Next item on your.
If you recall, we applied for Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. I got it right. PCCD. They had a new grant program. We applied for money to do various different things. The bad news is we didn't get any. We didn't get any of the grant money. The good news is that we also, the Borough of State College applied primarily funding for the joint records management system that we need to purchase in the next year or so, and they were fully funded for that?
Correct.
Yeah, so really, because they're fully funded, that'll probably save us $150,000 or something along that line. So that's the good news. The borough's getting money, and we won't have to provide that money in the next year or two for that new records management system. The more news is that they didn't award all the money into the grant. They have more money, and they're going to make more awards later on this year, but they didn't give us a definite schedule.
March, I think.
March, okay, so stay tuned. We still might get some of our projects funded, so.
Do they provide a rationale for denying?
No, not typically. When we were putting the grant together, one of the main criteria they were using was they wanted to point money towards communities that had crime rates that were above the state average, and along those lines. Our crime rate's far below the state average. So I would, if we went back and asked them, I'm sure that's what they'd tell us.
So then it's actually good news.
Pardon?
So it's actually good news then.
Well, we've always had a crime rate far below the state average, and we continue to make that one of our, one of the things we're very proud of.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't hit one of those lists, but generally we're in, you live in one of the safer communities when you run the numbers in Patton Township. Of course, sometimes one bad action in Patton Township, because we don't have a whole lot of crime, can move us up and down a lot on those lists. But typically so that's so a lot of the money, I think they were looking at larger urban areas that have more needs and more crime, higher crime rates. So, but we still might get, like I said, the last thing they said, there's more money available, and they'll be making additional grants based on that. So we'll just have to wait and see. Township office schedule, we're closed on January 16th, February 20th, and April 7th, and that's the end of my report.
Okay. Then we move to the next page, which is committee reports. And most of these are meetings that haven't been held yet, and so there won't be any report, but go ahead if you do have a report.
None of the groups have met yet.
That's good. So we'll go to number 11, which is other business. And now, just before we adjourn, we're going to have an executive session.
Well, you should adjourn first.
Okay, but we can take no action at it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just,
Is there a move to adjourn?
I have a question.
Second. Question.
I have a comment. I just want to thank Doug for the comment that this board was concerned for our residents during the sinkhole. And Doug, thank you for relaying the information that not only your staff, but this board and our community is very concerned. So as we move forward on the meeting on Friday, we want to...
well, let's be clear, that meeting on Friday is for residents.
Yeah.
And...
I was getting there.
Okay.
See, my chain of thought here. But to let our community know that our thoughts and prayers are with the families, and to our workers who are working very hard to work with the families and to work, Public Works, Fire Chief, EMS, Sean and Walt, especially Walt Snyder. Not only is he on call for 24/7 answering questions, but his concern and his dedication to help. We want, this board would like to say thank you. So, that's it.
I agree with that, and also Walter posted his own private phone number on the place where the land was posted, so that anyone with a question or concern could call him directly. Anything else? So we've had a motion to adjourn,
So moved.
and is there a second?
Second.
And it's been seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
How long is the next, we suppose? Okay. I hope everybody had a fine holiday season. We're going to, of course, our next meeting is later in January, and you may have to chair again,
Thank you.
which will be a benefit to this board.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're going to have an executive session. We take no official action, but it's on a personnel.
Do you think the executive session will be short? If it is, I suggest we stay here. If you think it's going to be long, we should probably go upstairs and let people clean up this room.
No, it's going to be short.
Okay.